Hello, everyone. It's Shane Kanto, your Wasteland Reviewer. And welcome to the Wasteland, my weekly show where I take a deep dive into a particular film. And this is the second straight week where I have a Best Picture nominee from 1940 from John Ford. Last week was The Grapes of Wrath, and this is The Long Voyage Home. And joining me for this episode is my buddy Adam. Adam, thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, it's a pleasure as always, Shane.
And this is can you, I'm trying to imagine a director today getting two Best Picture nominees in 1 year. And I'm just like, that's
The closest might have been Spielberg in '93 with Jurassic Park and Schindler's List. So I don't think it would have been not that it got not Jurassic Park got nominated, but would have been the closest, I imagine.
because like that just doesn't happen anymore. Because honestly, I don't think a lot of directors have multiple films coming out in the same year. But this was a special year for John Ford back in 1940, as I'm
Mm.
slowly but surely making it through the year of 2024 and making our way through the endless John Ford movies. But for those who haven't tuned into the show before, we have three segments. We have our coming attractions for the first weekend in April. It is finally April. This year's just moving along, and we'll be talking about
Yeah,
films
wow.
coming out April 5th, and then we'll get to the Long Voyage Home, our feature, and then full recommendations for you. So, starting with coming attractions, there's a lot of smaller type films. Wicked Little Letters is getting expanded release, and there's a new Omen prequel coming out. Which honestly, that trailer is really freaky because it's all in reverse, and so is the music, and it just feels unnerving as hell. But there's one particular film that I think Adam and I both are very excited about. Adam, what film did you pick for your coming attraction?
Monkey Man. Yeah, Dev Patel, anything Dev Patel, I'm going to be tuning in for,
Mhm.
considering he's directed it. Yeah, and well, co-writing it as well. Very keen, and the early buzz from South by Southwest is very good as well. So yeah,
Mhm.
super keen.
Oh yeah, Monkey Man was something that like the second I saw this trailer. Well, actually, first thing I heard about Jordan Peele producing, Dev Patel writing, directing, starring in. I'm like, that's an interesting prospect. And then I saw the trailer for
Yeah,
this. I'm like, this is right up my alley.
I've not seen the
'Cause
trailer, but
I've seen it a couple times specifically in theaters because they've been
mm,
pushing this one pretty hard, leading up to its release. And it's like it's like Indian John Wick and with a
yeah.
monkey mask in a ring at one point, and I'm just like, yep, I'm ready for this. I watched the trailer, I'm just like, this has so many vibes. I'm a huge action movie fan. I'm like, I want to see nonstop badass action starring Dev Patel. Because
Yeah,
like last thing that really stood out with Dev Patel, remembering when The Green Knight came out, which God, I love that movie. That was my most anticipated movie for 2020. And then
oh wow.
the world fell. And then we had to wait until 2021. But
Yeah,
now Dev Patel's back. I I want to see him do more things and get opportunities to be in bigger stuff too.
absolutely.
It's
Yeah.
so crazy seeing him come all the way from like Slumdog Millionaire to what he is now.
Yep.
And like he can do everything. And I'm excited to see what he does with the full reins on this film. So it's definitely going to be, I hope it's one of those films that gets attention, especially at the box office, because we
Yes.
need films like this
It'd be
that
nice.
are good and really cool and unique in certain ways to actually get some love. It'll be interesting because it's post Ghostbusters, post Godzilla Kong, and basically its only new release competition's a horror film. So like horror
Yeah.
movie people will go see First Omen. Maybe a little bit more people because it is The Omen. It's not just some random horror film. But here's to hoping that Dev Patel and Jordan Peele make some good money off of Monkey Man. So
Fingers crossed. Absolutely.
fingers crossed. Now, something completely different. Let's hop on aboard a ship and get lost at sea with a bunch of mostly Irish question mark sailors. because I definitely questioned where some of these people were from, John Wayne. As we're here to talk about The Long Voyage Home, which I did mention already. This is from 1940, directed by John Ford. Some background. It is starring a couple of pretty consistent John Ford collaborators. John Wayne's in it. Thomas Mitchell is in it. And we even get a Ward Bond sighting because he seems to be popping up in
Yeah.
supporting roles in like all of John Ford's films that I've been watching. This is based on the plays from Eugene O'Neill. It's like an amalgamation of a couple different stories pulled together, as it would seem. And this the play took place at the beginning of World War One. They updated this to be like in the beginning parts of World War Two. So that's one change they did wind up making. Greg Toland's cinematography is probably the biggest thing that this gets attention for, and also was considered one of the forebearers of the look of noir, which is so
Mm.
weird because this is not a noir, like at all.
No,
But
no.
there's a couple of sequences in it. Like there's one dock sequence with like street
Yeah,
lights and everything. I'm like,
yeah,
is this a noir?
yeah.
So
I know
that kind
the
of
one you mean.
cinematography was very much praised, and specifically, this was indeed nominated for, it looks like, 6 Academy Awards. It didn't win anything, but John Ford sure got a lot of nominations. This was nominated for Best
Mm.
Picture, lost to Rebecca from Alfred Hitchcock. So, screenplay, cinematography. I wouldn't have been surprised if that won cinematography. I have to go back and
No,
check
no,
what
no.
won black and white cinematography for that. Editing, score, and special effects, which I'm not surprised about because we'll get into that, but there's definitely some thrilling moments in the film. But
Mm.
Adam, what are your general thoughts on the long voyage home?
Um, well, I really liked it, and just to piggyback on your talk about the cinematography, it is a beautiful looking film, and that shot I think you were talking about is when one of the guys is trying to escape from being on the ship, and there's
Mhm.
just this long shot of him escaping through the docks, and it's just so beautiful. Like
Yeah.
it's stunning. Yeah, like it's really because the most of the rest of the movie is kind of contained on the ship, and there's a little bit
Mhm.
when they're in a pub when they hit land, but just this one shot was just incredibly stunning and worth watching the film just for that shot. But I mean, the film's a good film, so but just worth watching just for the way it looks, honestly. Other general thoughts, kind of, it did start off for me a bit shaky, but I kind of got into a groove of it a little bit. Like it's a bit suggestive at the very start when they run into those sirens on. They're in the Caribbean, right? But they run into Mexican girls. But I mean, I
They
Mexico
were
is
in
maybe
the
technically
West Indies,
West Indies, West Indies, yeah.
according
So,
to the synopsis. So,
yeah, but for some reason they run into Mexican girls and they come on the ship and feed them rum. But there's a couple of really suggestive shots in that, which I go, oh, okay, this is sneaking through the haze code a little bit. I don't
yeah,
know if you know ones I mean, but yeah. But anyway, but yeah, it started off a bit shaky. But it really got into it when it once it got down into the. I wouldn't even say there's a camaraderie between the crew on this ship. They all seem to hate each other. They're all from different backgrounds. None of them
mhm.
seem to really get along. But when it boils down to the nitty gritty, they do form this bond. So I think it's like a growth of this group of guys. That's what kind of dragged me along through it. Yeah. So I mean, yeah, really good film. Yeah.
Yeah, it was very interesting from the start because even the opening shots of it were really gorgeous, and they were very
Mm,
specific shots of like these women like leaning up against the trees, and you're just like looking, and you're
yeah.
just like, wow, they're lingering here, and you're
It's
kind of like,
pervy. Yeah.
what kind of film is this? Because like
Yeah.
it's so interesting because even the cinematography there kind of has that lighting and everything. You're just like,
Mm,
is this supposed to be like some kind of mystery or like what kind of thing is going on here? It
yeah.
just for some reason they're like, you know what, we're gonna make this very mysterious, cool, ominous cinematography sprinkled throughout this film, which is just about like a group of guys on a boat. But those moments really stand out, and especially when they get to land at the end, I think how the
Mm,
camera maneuvers the city and like the
yeah,
cobblestone and like the darkness with like the street lights, that also kind of pulls together. But I think the point in the film that really started pulling me in was this, because like they have this whole entire thing where like they have the women on board, they're doing all kinds of stuff, and then it turns into all out brawl. And like
yeah, yeah,
people get stabbed, and it's like, is he dead? Like, is this where this film's going right off the bat? And
yeah.
so, like,
Right.
you can tell there's a lot of tension on this ship, but there's a storm that hits, and
Yes,
Ward Bond, his character is really like the catalyst for like this sequence lasted between the storm and the aftermath, like a good 15 minutes of screen time, building up to this pretty big emotional loss for the crew. And there's some really
mm,
good acting in it. It's really well set up. And I'm like, okay, I'm starting to like feel the connection here. And it continued to build off of that because you have a
yeah,
couple of significant moments of like, and I'm sure this is where some of that special effects praise came in. There's like a bomber sequence, which
yeah.
like there's like in the background you show like actual water getting bombed, you
Mm,
know, and they're all like, ah, because they're acting in front of the screen. But there's
yeah, yeah.
another big emotional moment because, like, this film doesn't shy away from loss. And I think that's where,
No,
like, the emotional impact of this story really hits because you're slowly building the camaraderie amongst this crew and you lose some key people along the way and you can feel the loss. Even like the I love there's a sequence where there's growing paranoia about like I loved this sequence of shots because you have one of the crew members opening one of the little windows
yes,
and it's for very personal just like enjoyment reasons like he's trying to like smoke something or other and he's like opening the window or whatever but the crew's on edge and they're like, is there a spy? Somebody's making
still the light.
signals with the light. And like I
Yeah,
love
yeah.
that shot down. Like the cinematography in this is great, but that shot down from like the deck down, you just see the little door, and you're just like,
Yes,
it's building that sense. And then it comes to a boiling point where all of these men are at each other's throats at this one crew member. And it's heightening and heightening and heightening. And then these letters start getting read, and I'm like, this movie didn't need to get this hard. Like, there's some like
yeah,
heavy stuff going
yeah.
on
There
in these
really is.
letters,
Yeah,
and you're just
yeah.
like, you all feel like a bunch of assholes now, don't you?
Well, it's dealing with this guy's alcoholism, like in a way
Yeah,
that honestly, I don't think. Well, apart from the long week, the long
the
weekend.
long weekend. Yeah,
Yeah,
or no,
yeah,
the
which I
lost
love the long
lost
weekend.
weekend.
The
Yes.
Lost Weekend, sorry. I love that movie. I love it
Yeah.
enough I didn't even know the name of it. But
Well, to be fair, we're talking about the long voyage home, the lost
yeah,
weekend.
there we go. I'll use that excuse. But yeah, but I don't. The Lost Weekend was the first time I'd seen anything deal with substance abuse or addiction
Yeah,
problems from that time. And this kind of I can't even remember what year that was made, but it was probably after this. But yeah,
I
so
think it's
having
the late 40s or close to
yeah,
somewhere around there. So, like, yeah,
yeah,
Billy
which is
Wilder had that almost a decade later.
yeah, so it's really interesting to see them deal with alcohol because it would have been a real problem back then, especially guys that are approaching war, or some of them might have been World War I vets even. Not that they really say, but this is, I mean, we haven't mentioned it is leading into World War II before it actually
Yes.
kicks off. So yeah, before America joined the World War II, yeah, because they did join
Well,
later.
yeah, because this movie came out before Pearl Harbor. This is what's so
Yes,
fascinating about this period of filmmaking because you're like, a bunch of the world's in a war already. And we're just chilling
yeah,
over here, still making
that's
like
right.
films and stuff like that. And this is such an interesting time to be making a film like this because the story is they're going from the West Indies to like Baltimore to London, like they're going all across the
Yeah,
Atlantic, and there's real danger. that winds up happening because like there's real shit
Absolutely.
going on, and I'd be interested if like this might be some of the first experience that Americans have of like, oh, like we see there's stuff going on elsewhere, kind of
Yes.
thing.
Yeah, absolutely. If they were sitting in the cinema watching this, yeah, absolutely. It might have been people's first realization that it was real because obviously, the news cycle was a bit more delayed back then than it is today. So, and taking that little ship, it's not a massive ship across the Atlantic, would have been harrowing in itself. And it must have taken weeks
Hmm.
through all those U boats and whatever that would have been in there. I mean, would have been cool if I touched on that a bit more, but, you know, we got where we got.
Yeah, because I
Um,
like obviously we got that bomber sequence, and it's like, yeah,
yeah,
we're getting into some rough places. I'm assuming it didn't touch on it too much because the vast majority of the film takes place what in the Caribbean, up the east coast
yeah.
of the United States, but then it's like getting to
They
London,
did,
and
they
like,
did they did kind of yada yada the trip from Baltimore to London. It was
yeah,
apart from the
we
bombing, it
don't
was
need to
just
talk about Baltimore. We don't need to see Baltimore and just keep on going.
not now with what's happening there. Poor buggers.
Well, it's
Sorry,
interesting that it's very interesting that you brought up the like the lateness of news because what happened in like the cargo ship ramming into that bridge is the complete opposite. At this point, people were like on it. That video was out and on
yes,
Twitter, like everywhere
I was
immediately.
watching it about 2 hours after it happened in bed. I couldn't believe. I didn't think it was real. Like honestly, it was bizarre.
And it's so interesting because yeah, the this kind of film was something where it's like, yeah, stuff's going down off in Europe. Like we're all chilling over
Yeah,
here, fine,
absolutely.
but like stuff's happening. And
Mm,
I don't know how I felt once this film got to land. I feel like I didn't expect there to be as much time once they got there. Because
no, no, yeah,
and they spent like a good, I don't know, 20 minutes or so of screen time
the whole last
on land
act.
at the end. Yeah, and
Yeah,
it develops into a whole entire act. And
mm,
you have the whole John Wayne where John Wayne actually has something to do, and you finally find out he's
yes,
Swedish, and I'm like,
Ole.
Swedish my ass. It's like, no.
The accent is just speak differently, John. Just do whatever you think. it's just I don't know what accent it is, but it's not Swedish.
Well, yeah, because like Thomas Mitchell is very obviously supposed to be Irish, which makes
Mm,
sense. Like John Wayne has a strong connection to Ireland. His family was from Ireland. He's made films about Ireland. So like there's some Irish people on this boat. And I'm like, is John Wayne supposed to be Irish? Because if he is, that's the worst Irish accent I've ever heard. And then they're like, he's Swedish, and I'm like, that's not much better. Like,
no,
what is this?
uh,
So you have that whole entire sequence. And speaking of Thomas Mitchell, like towards the very end of this film, it's just like there's some great subtle storytelling visuals. It's all about what we see. We don't need something to be told us because the final moments of this is simply
mm,
looking at a newspaper
yes, yeah,
and the news of what happened. And
yeah,
we know the unfortunate fate of one of these
mm,
characters that we've been connected with the whole time. So, like, this film doesn't even avoid all the way up until the very end, just hitting you with those emotional losses and stuff like that. I'm like
well,
this film doesn't shy away from that.
no, and it kind of alludes to throughout. Like these merchant seamen are they're basically prisoners. Like we get that from that opening scene we were talking about on the dock with the guys trying to run
Mhm.
away. But throughout, they are kind of jailed. And when they get to London, they're basically grifted to get onto this ship that they know is a horrible ship to work on because the crew are yelling out to them, come and work here. And they're like, and they see the name of the ship. And they're like, no way would you ever work for you on that
It's
ship,
just
blah, blah,
like
blah.
goodbye,
And then,
get out of here.
yeah, and then spoilers, like they basically get drunk or they're not forced to get drunk, but they're grifted at a bar and, oh, we'll buy the first round and whatnot. And they bring these women in who I assume are prostitutes, and then basically get them so drunk they kidnap them, put them on this ship, and then we see that newspaper headline, which is a beautiful way to reveal. I thought that was a great way to reveal that
Yeah.
as well, with that water. Yeah, that looks stunning. But yeah, it's the kind of these guys they weren't free men, they were kind of, and that's where that what I've written in one of my notes is that the confined paranoia, like because they were all in this tight space, and normally with that you'd have some bonding and they'd be friends, but they weren't. They just kind of niggled at each other the entire time, which you would imagine what might happen in jail. I don't know, or prison, I
Mhm.
guess. Yeah. So,
Yeah,
um,
it's a floating prison. And
yeah,
even them getting home is not a
mm,
release. And that's the
no,
sad, unfortunate turn of events. And yeah, absolutely, my stomach sank when that newspaper, like the last shot on
yeah,
that newspaper, because you're like, if you're paying attention, you know what happened.
mm-hmm,
And you're just like,
mm,
because there's a couple of heavy emotional losses throughout this film, and this film just gets you at the end and just reinforces that this is not an easy life. This is a dangerous
no,
life. And I feel like also that final shot probably would make a big effect on a audience in 1940 in America
absolutely,
who's not involved in
absolutely,
the war and seeing like, oh, like merchant ships are getting bombed and stuff like that by the
yeah,
Nazis.
yeah,
And you're just like, oh, like there's some bad stuff really going on, and this can affect us. And then, little do we know, year later, we get attacked in
mm,
Hawaii, and then all hell breaks loose on both fronts, and things pick up from there, at least from like the American perspective. And what's so interesting is my John Ford series is going to shift to all war films. Him there videotaping and actually making documentaries about the US fighting overseas because John Ford was in the military and he was a military documentarian. So his job was to make these films to send back home to show in theaters of like, rah, look at us, good
yeah,
ass. And John Ford, I am sure, was more than happy to make those film and be like, rah, America, yeah. And it'll be interesting watching some of those films, especially because, like, up to this point, I've watched nothing but narrative films. So it'll be interesting to see that kind of shift from this film that has like a narrative that alludes to the dangers of war and then actually seeing combat on film. So I feel like this film is an interesting, like stepping stone into where John Ford's career is going to go for the next like
mm,
5 years. So I thought this was a very well made film, a very engaging, heavy film. It had those emotional beats. It had really great technical aspects. It's definitely one of the higher up John Ford films for me so far that I've watched.
yeah. It's Freak. I was honestly surprised that it was nominated for Best Picture, but looking back in 1940, then yeah, it kind of makes sense. I mean, it is a good enough film, but I'm not sure whether Best Picture worthy. But yeah, like, I'd still highly recommend someone to watch it or anyone to watch it. It's a good
Yeah,
little film. Check out.
I'm gonna do a quick bit of research to see. I know Grapes of Wrath was nominated. I know Rebecca won Best Picture, so I'm
Yeah,
just kind of checking out to see because back then there was still a large amount of nominees because it was still
yes,
going for best. Uh, John Ford won that year for best directing for Grapes of Wrath, and then
hmm
outstanding production was Rebecca, All This and Heaven 2, Foreign Correspondent, The Grapes of Wrath, The Great Dictator, Kitty Foyle, The Letter, The Long Voyage Home, Our Town, and The Philadelphia Story.
yeah. There
So
were
there's
10.
a couple of pretty heavy hitters in terms of classic cinema in that year
Yeah.
between Rebecca, Grapes of Wrath, The Great Dictator, Philadelphia Story, and then like Foreign Correspondent, this Our Town. So it was in some pretty darn good company for Best Picture.
Yeah, absolutely. There are some good nominees there. Yeah, and you're right. It is some good company.
But I guess Adam, do you have any other thoughts that you wanted to add about the Long Voyage Home?
No, I think we've covered everything, to be honest. So, yeah.
All righty. So just to give a little bit of update to everybody. So right now, this was my number five John Ford film that I've watched so far. Grapes of Wrath and Stagecoach are at top, with Four Sons and The Informer still kind of sticking up there so far in what I've been watching. Everybody should just know at this point, once I watch The Searchers, that's going to be number one because that's one of my top 25 favorite films of all time. So
Oh,
unless one
wow.
of these John Ford films like really blows me away for a first time watch, that's probably what's going to wind up at top. But I did really appreciate the Grapes of Wrath rewatch, and then this was a first time watch for me. So I definitely would like to watch this film again. We have recommendations for all of you outside of the Long Voyage Home.
Mm.
And Adam, what Apple show would you like to recommend?
Yeah, well, I'll keep with my tradition of recommending Apple shows. The completely made up adventures of Dick Turpin. It's maybe a little bit as nutty as the title would suggest. It's just a six-part British show, which because British like to do just six-part series,
Mhm,
starring some people from Noel Fielding from the Mighty Boosh and some
mhm.
other familiar faces. If you watch a bit of British stuff, it's very British humour. Doesn't always land, but when it does, it does. Like it's just an interesting bunch of really eclectic and strange characters and wild humor, to be honest. So yeah, really, really worth checking out. Had a lot of fun with it. It's now finished airing, or well, not airing, dropping on Apple. So definitely
Yeah,
worth
you
checking
could
out.
watch the whole thing in 3 hours at this point
Yeah,
because just six episodes,
absolutely.
30 minutes apiece. And this is one of those shows I'm so tempted to not skip the intro because that theme song
Mm,
is such a banger.
it
And
is.
honestly, this was one of my favorite. It's one of my favorite shows of 2024 so far. I just had such a ball with
Absolutely.
this. I had so much fun.
Yeah.
Like Fargo season five, whatever the most recent season of
Season
Fargo
five.
was. Like that's still sitting at the top for me. I'm a huge Fargo fan, but like this was something that just I laughed a lot. It just has such a great cast, quirky, crazy characters, fun surprises. Hugh Bonneville is doing so much great work in
Yes.
this.
Yeah. He does
And
actually.
yeah, he winds up in such a fun place at the end of this first season. And I'm just like, well, he's going to be coming
Yes.
back for more in season two.
Mm-hmm. Hope season
But
two is really soon though. I hope it's very soon.
I know they are. Well, I don't think Apple has greenlit it yet.
No.
So hopefully they do, because I'm like, I need more of this. Like, and there's so much they can make out of this because you could keep. I really hope that in the second season they get Julian Barrett to show up somewhere. I want him to be another highwayman,
This is actually based on
like an
a
actual
show from
person.
the 70s and 80s. Yeah, and an actual person. Yeah. It was
But
also a
like,
show in the 70s.
mhm.
I'm blown away by that.
Yeah, I did
Yeah.
actually
So,
notice that when I looked it up earlier. But no, my wife knew who Dick Turpin was. She's all about all kinds of weird random history. So she's like, she knew who Dick
yeah,
Turpin
okay.
was.
Right.
And of course, from the title that this is a completely fictionalized account of his life. So,
Yeah, yeah. There's a lot
and
of there's a lot of little cool and obvious one-liners, like dick jokes, basically. But they they come at times you're not expecting them, and in normal circumstances, if it was a badly written show, you just roll your eyes and go, "How bad?" But it's written so well and timed so well that they're always funny. These dick jokes. Yeah. Anyway,
they,
that's
they can't get away with not making dick jokes when the main character of your show is Dick Turpin. Like,
oh,
you
man.
gotta. You gotta.
This is crazy. I've just typed in Dick Turpin in IMDb, and there's such a list of shows and movies about Dick Turpin. I didn't know he was such a legendary. He's like, I guess he must have been like the Australian Ned Kelly, like Ned Kelly is to Australia. Dick
Yeah, I'm
Turpin
trying
is
to
to.
see if there's like Victor McLaughlin, Dick Turpin in 1934. Oh my God. That's going way back. Victor McLaughlin is a
Yeah,
big John Ford actor. He was in a couple of
right.
his films. Yeah, there seems to be quite a bit of adaptations of this.
It really is.
Interesting.
Yeah, the
Might have to
Highwayman.
check out some of these.
Voyage.
There you go.
Yeah.
But I have two quick recommendations. I love Steve Martin. I love him so much. And
Mm,
God, that Steve Martin, a documentary in two pieces on Apple TV Plus was 3 hours and 13 minutes, totally well spent. Because it's split into two like
I can't
hour
wait.
38, hour 35 minute sections. And this is from Morgan Neville, who directed Won't You Be My Neighbor? And the
Mm,
Roadrunner, that Anthony Bourdain documentary. So like he knows how to make really quality documentaries about like famous celebrities, and like this film just captures the essence of Steve Martin and pulls back so many great layers about who he is as a person. And I loved every second of it. And it just made me want to watch like every single Steve Martin movie ever made.
yeah. Yeah. But during these times, I mean, I'm super keen for this series. Like when I saw the first headline for it, um, but during his time of and his peak movie making in the 80s, 90s, he wasn't really appreciated. Like a lot of his movies, I used to hear like jokes about. It's a shame that Steve Martin's movies aren't as good as his stand up, or why isn't he as good? Like, even when he hosted the Oscars, I remember people saying it's a shame his movies aren't as good as he is. But you go back and he's made a lot of good movies. There's quite a few great movies he's in. There's a few mediocre ones, but
The Jerk is one of the funniest,
The Jerk is amazing.
craziest movies
Yeah,
ever made.
The Jerk is really,
Well,
really good.
when I was a young black child. Just like,
Yeah.
what?
I like when he at the start when he goes hitchhiking and the dude just drops him off next door. That's so stupid.
Or the cans. He hates the cans. And
Oh
I
man.
love Dirty Rotten Scoundrels. The whole
Yeah. Yep.
like that whole entire thing. And
Yes.
like even stuff like I love Parenthood. He's so good in
Yes.
that. And that's such a great ensemble. Three Amigos. Like it's so
Planes,
ridiculous and
trains.
fun. Planes, Trains, and Automobiles is
Yeah.
that movie's so funny and so
Yeah.
emotional and just hits on so many different levels. I'm so glad that John and Hughes refused to cut the F string of F bombs in that
Yeah.
scene
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
because a rated
Yeah.
R movie,
It's
it's
funny.
not a rated R movie. It has
It's not
one
rated R because
scene.
of that.
It's
Right.
literally rated R because of that one scene.
Yeah. Right.
And he's just like, this and that. And she's like, well, I guess you're effed. It's just like,
Yeah.
it's so good. And I love seeing him on Only Murders in the Building again, like seeing
Yep.
him in something
Yeah.
again, so good. But it's such a interesting in-depth exploration. One rewatch of my own films that I wanted to share was La Courte Point. So like I went into this, I was part little context. This is probably like sometime during the pandemic, there was the Magic of Film Instagram page that I was following closely, and he did a Filmstagram movie club community. And each month there was a director, and each week there's one of their films, and a whole bunch of people watch them, post all their reviews about it. And we went on a whole month of Agnes Varda. And now I bought an Agnes
Oh,
Varda set that I got on Criterion, and I rewatched one of them. And this film is such a small, quaint La Pointe Courte. I mixed that up. And it's just a small, quaint 80-minute film about this small town. It's gorgeously shot. It's about this young couple just like navigating through this town. Richard Linklater had to have watched Agnes Varda
Ah,
films, I swear, because so
okay.
many of her films are like in the moment of just this roaming experiential kind of thing. And this one was a nice rewatch. It's only 80 minutes. It's beautifully shot. It has interesting performances and characters in this small like fishing town. So it's definitely I would highly recommend just in general checking out some of Agnes Varda's films like Cleo from 5 to 7 was another one. Vagabond. There are a couple of the ones that really stood out to me. And this one real quick recommendation. So I did not expect a ton going into In the Land of Saints and Sinners, the new Liam Neeson crime thriller. Because, we get a
Oh,
new
okay.
Liam Neeson crime thriller almost every year.
Yeah.
This movie rocked. I low key love this movie. It is a
Wow.
neo western that takes place in 70s Northern Ireland. So like it's such a western. It has all the motifs of a western, but like capturing this beautiful setting of Northern Ireland where a group of IRA terrorists wind up blowing up a bar and killing children by accident in the crossfire, and they go into hiding in this small off the map kind of town where it just so happens Finbar Murphy, played by Liam Neeson, who actually gets to be Irish for once. Uh,
Yeah.
he is a hitman hiding in plain sight. He's best friends with the Garda, the sheriff, played by Kieran Hines, and he winds up wanting to retire from working with Cole Meany's character and winds up getting pulled back in because he sees this injustice happening. And it puts him on a collision course with Carrie Condon, who is the main
Mm.
antagonist, who's this member of the IRA, and
Wow.
she is fierce. I'm like,
Wow.
I fell in love with Carrie Condon in Banshees of Inisherin as Siobhan. She was like my favorite character. She
Yes,
is
he's good.
like she straight up strangles a woman with her bare one hand and calls her a c word straight to her face. And I'm just like she is such an intimidating character, and her and Liam Neeson going toe to toe, even just verbally, is so intense and awesome. Even like
Yeah.
Jack Gleason, uh, Joffrey is a young hitman in this movie, and it's just such an incredible cast. It like this was like I loved it. Everything about it was like my jam. So definitely would recommend.
Okay, that sounds interesting.
Like, and it has some pretty like it has around like an 80% on Rotten Tomatoes. So like it has decently high reviews too for a Liam Neeson action thriller at this point.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I was just like really blown away by it. And I wrote almost a 2-page review for SiftPop this afternoon for it because I'm just like
Oh, wow.
gushing about this movie. So it kind of like nobody knew this movie was coming out, and it's just getting buried by the Godzilla Kong movie that's coming out this weekend.
Yeah.
I'd rather people go see this movie than Godzilla Kong, just putting it that way. It's not going to
Oh, yeah.
happen,
I'm not
but
hearing
oh
great
well.
things. I'm not hearing great things about Godzilla film.
I've been seeing the weirdest whiplash of reactions to it. Like I saw some people
Mm.
like this and Dune Part Two made me believe in big epic films again. I'm like,
Com- Probably shouldn't compare the two, but
yeah, I don't know if I would put those two. And then I'm seeing other like very middling, just like, well, it's big, dumb, and stupid, uh,
yeah,
kind of things.
yeah,
So I'm seeing it
yeah.
tomorrow. So I'll have thoughts.
Yeah,
But
I might see it too. I like the other legendary releases. I think they're fun. They're fun. They're not supposed to be
honestly,
my art.
Monarch, that show on Apple, made me have a whole
Yeah,
other level of appreciation for these movies.
yeah,
And also, we
yeah.
need more
Monarch is really
Kurt
good.
Russell. Just my personal opinion.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if he comes into the. I doubt it. I doubt there'll be. crossings or crossovers.
Yeah,
We'll see.
based off of what happened at the end of the first season, I don't know. But we didn't see exactly what happened to him, so there's always an
That's right.
option.
That's
But
right.
Adam, thank you so much for coming on, as always.
Yeah, no, thank you. Always a pleasure.
And everybody, I'll be back next week with the next episode for Tobacco Road, and that will be Jess, my wife, coming back on for that one. So tune in next week. But thank you as always for tuning in and always supporting your Wasteland Reviewer.